starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Bi-Weekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
welcome to we're off a little bit. I guess this is the January 23rd meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'm Kevin Baum, I'm the chair. To my left is Bob Pryor, vice chair, Esther Olson-Murphy, who is our clerk, Laura Davies, and Martha Pennell. We are going to start with the continued application of Riverwoods Company, and for that application, we're going to, Bob and Martha have recused themselves, so they're going to step down and make their way to a comfortable seat in the audience. Take chocolates with you. Martha did. She knows.
Not scared.
Doing it right.
This is a continuation of the two public hearings from last month. I recognize many of the people in the audience, so you were here. As just an initial point of order, there was a question submitted about whether we were opening the public hearing. My intention is to reopen the public hearing. I thought I had said that at the last meeting. If I didn't, I apologize. I'd like to have the applicant they've provided some additional information. I'd invite them up to present that information, whatever they wish from that, and then we will reopen the public comment. Because of the similarities of the two applications, the applicant has presented them together. I think that makes sense to continue to do. And when I open it up for public comment, I will be opening it up for comments on both the applications. So whichever application you're here to speak to, feel free to speak to either one when I open it up. We don't need to separate them. Though I would ask you at that time to just identify yourself and where you live and to which application or both that you're speaking to. And so with this, welcome the applicant to begin their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Sharon Summers. I'm with Donahue, Tucker, and Shindella, and I'm here tonight with Riverwoods Company. First of all, I want to thank the board for having this continued hearing in response to the letter that I wrote to you on January 9th. I hope that this will be helpful to the board, both in terms of the supplemental material that we provided and also the additional commentary from certain residents. So I just want to take a quick moment to outline what I think is the purpose of this meeting, and what the first purpose is to present the supplements. Those supplements were presented to you again in that letter of January 9th, and they consist of two things. One is correspondence from attorney Mark McHugh. He is with the law firm of Hinckley, Allen, and Snyder, and he serves as healthcare counsel to Riverwoods. During the course of the last meeting, a question was posed as to whether or not insurance commissioner review was required. And so what we did, and we represented during the meeting that it had been and that it wasn't an issue, but what we did subsequent to that time was that we contacted our attorney and posed the question to him as to whether insurance review, commissioner review was necessary. He in turn provided his letter in which he definitively indicated that it is not. The other question that was posed was whether or not the proposal complies with the resident agreement, which each resident has with Riverwoods. And again, his commentary contained in his letter of January 6th indicates that it is in compliance. The other item which we provided, and this was in a response to a question which the board or the chair raised, and that is, given the fact that this is a variance that runs with the land, what happens if for some reason only certain portions of Riverwoods is chosen to be conveyed. And so taking that into account, despite it's just not practical that would happen, but certainly in reflection or in acknowledgement of the board's concerns about this, what we did is that we went back to the trustees and we asked them to pass a resolution to indicate that in the event that Riverwoods was going to be conveyed to, and I think that the language is, to a third party at any time in the future, then the corporation must convey together all 3 parcels of land on which the retirement community is operated, and no parcel may be sold individually. The resolution goes on, and this is dated January 6th. The resolution goes on to indicate that it becomes effective on the date when the variance to allow a centralized health center is granted and is non-appealable, and it's going to be in effect and not modified or rescinded while the variance is in effect. So those are the 2 items which the board asked for, and I hope that provides some degree of answers to your questions. The second purpose here tonight, which is outlined in my letter, is that subsequent to when we were here on December 20th, we were contacted by a number of residents at the Woods who expressed grave concerns that this board may inadvertently have kind of a one-sided view of what the residents thought about this proposal, and in fact, they thought it was very important that this board understood that many of them vigorously support this proposal. And so we have here tonight with us not an inordinate number of people, but a couple of people that want to present the views of the Woods to supplement the petition and the letters that were submitted by over 140 residents of the Woods. And then finally, I do need to note for the record that, and while this is not technically one of the purposes of this meeting, that we are proceeding tonight with a less than full board, given the circumstances in which we face ourselves. I provided a copy of a letter that I had sent to the Board of Selectmen, to you, or the Select Board, I should say, indicating that in our review, that's not a particularly meaningful choice. And as I took great pains to say in the letter, I respect very much the work that you folks do, and I don't mean that to be a criticism, but I do need to say for the record that the choice to proceed tonight with less than a full board is not a particularly substantive choice, and I will leave it at that.
Yep. Thank you. I would note that we do have quorum and can proceed, although I understand and I appreciated that letter because I agree, we need more members of this board. I don't want to be up here with the bare minimum.
Right.
Or continuing applications, so thank you.
What I'd like to do now, or to me, the challenge for the board tonight is going to be to weigh the evidence presented to you solely based upon your jurisdiction and the legal criteria in the variance, and not on a motion. I will turn this over to some supporter comments from the Woods, but I would also like to, following the conclusion of the remainder of the public hearing, be able to have an opportunity to respond and try to provide some framework for your analysis, which may or may not be of help. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is this part of your presentation, or are your members presenting? I know you have supporters here. Are they supporting? I'm trying to determine whether we just open it up to the public now, or whether you're asking for people to present as part of your presentation tonight.
I think we can open it up to the public now, and what I would ask that the supporters do is to get up and speak as members of the public in support.
Okay. Thank you. And you will have, as is always our approach, you will have an opportunity to address any comments made in the public session tonight.
All right, thank you. I should also add, are there any questions about or either now or during the course of the hearing, do you have any questions about the supplemental materials that we provided? Because we're happy to answer those, and I have Justine Vogel with me, and Kim Gaskell, and also Dave Brownell, the chair of the trustees. So, and it doesn't need to be right now, but just know that we're available to answer those questions.
Thank you. I had no questions. I thought it was straightforward.
I just had a quick question. Maybe it doesn't even matter, but it was about the two, and yes, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter, but it was about the two aspects that are addressed by the Insurance Commission and I can find it quickly. There was one, it had something to do with going concern, and I didn't understand
Was this in Mark McHugh's letter?
yes.
Okay.
Relative to this context, so.
All right, let me just.
Maybe it's not, I don't know whether it matters or not, but I just didn't understand what that meant relative to this context.
Let me just take a quick look.
Yeah. On page 2, it talks about, the second paragraph,
I see it in the top portion of the page.
a going concern reservation. I just didn't know what that meant.
I'm going to have probably Justine address this. In answer to your question, I don't think it has any bearing on this
Okay.
discussion, but certainly for your reference, I think Justine can get up here and address it. So I've got the letter. This is a pop quiz, Justine. Let's see. Can you point out to me where it's?
I don't want to make it into a big thing. If it's not an easy question, we can leave it.
It's right here.
I know what a going concern is, I just didn't know how it applied in this situation.
I don't know what the exact statute is, but a going concern reservation would mean that, from accounting language, it would mean that you would not be able to continue as a going concern. So we note that Riverwoods is prohibited from engaging in any activity that would impair its compliance with the liquid reserves requirement under the statute or create a going concern reservation. So, for example, I think what Mark is trying to say there is we could not put our assets at risk, our invested assets at risk. We have to have enough liquid assets to be able to continue our business. Okay. I think that's the only alliance there.
Okay, I just needed a little context. Thank you.
Okay, and at this point, I'll ask some of the Woods people to come up.
Well, I get to do that, Sharon.
Pardon me?
I said I get to do that.
I apologize. I'm counting on your jurisdiction.
So at this point, I am going to open it to the public, because we can start with supporters, although I will open it to whoever. We typically don't distinguish, so anyone who wants to speak to, for, generally about the request tonight is welcome to come up. Please state your name and address. It would be helpful if you are a Riverwoods resident to also indicate which campus you live. And I did want to note at the outset, we received a number of letters. At least one requested that it be read into the record. Given the volume, I do not intend to read any of the letters into the record, but we have all read them. They are part of the record, whether they are read out loud or not. And anyone who wants to speak, who has sent a letter, feel free to speak again tonight. Although I'd ask if you did submit it, we do have a lot of people, so if you can just keep your comments concise.
About 3 minutes.
What's that?
I have about 3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes
Okay.
is absolutely fine.
My name is Ellen Kingsbury, and I've lived at the Woods campus at Riverwoods for about 4 years now. I'm presently still working as a nurse practitioner, and I've taught nursing for 27 years at Boston University and University of New Hampshire. I'm not an expert at finances or building codes, but I can speak to reasons for consolidation as relates to nursing staff. As you know, the present healthcare facility at the Woods is out of code and must be replaced. The healthcare facility at the Boulders and the Ridge are fine, as far as I know, and could well be used for years in the future. The point here is that it is inefficient and wasteful to have 3 healthcare facilities, all needing the same things: supplies, services, all hiring nursing staff. Having 3 is unsustainable, as we will not be able to staff them. Nurses are everything. It's the reason people are in the healthcare facility. The whole issue is that there is a standard of care that must be delivered to each patient every day. Nurses will be expensive and will be expected to be not only competent, but experts in technology. In preparing this little talk, I did quite a bit of research to find out where nursing will be in 5 years and 10 years. Pretty surprising. Mobile technology to relay up-to-the-minute information to team members will be routine. Updating patient charts, checking vital signs, medication schedules will be accomplished by smart beds with integrated sensors, digital monitors, and wearable technology. We'll have to hire more highly trained people, of which there will be fewer and fewer available. Having one healthcare facility would allow flexibility for the nursing staff. There will be a larger pool to draw from. There'll be sufficient numbers to cover for emergencies and to maintain a standard of excellence in patient care. Life expectancy has risen dramatically over the last century, and more and more of us will be living into old age. It'll require a larger workforce of nurses. This means that relative to the need, there will be fewer nurses. Thus, the nursing staff must be used as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to speak, just step up as soon as the last person's done.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Corbett. I live at the Woods campus. I have lived there for 8 years. I'm reading a summary from another resident who planned to be here until the snowstorm this afternoon. She is handicapped and would have trouble manipulating through the snow. So this is Joan's statement. Good evening. My name is Joan Caldwell, and I live with my husband in the Woods campus at Riverwoods, Exeter. I was born in Exeter Hospital. I lived here in Exeter until I went away to college in 1962. Then I came back to Exeter in 2014 and moved into the Woods. The Woods is the original building now, three-pronged campus of Riverwoods, Exeter. We have lived in Riverwoods for nearly 9 years. And 3 years ago, both my husband and I had stays in Monadnock, the assisted living and skilled nursing care facility at the Woods. While I was there, memory-challenged residents would wander into my room and sit down to chat. I did not mind the interruptions, but I know that other residents were not happy with the aimless wandering of dementia patients, a reason for a memory unit. Most recently, I visited a dear friend of mine almost every day in Monadnock for 9 months. I got to see firsthand the physical state of the unit right now. Let me first say that the nursing care from all levels of the nursing staff, RNs, LPNs, nursing assistants at Monadnock is superb, but the facilities are outdated. There are shared showers, small rooms, dripping faucets. Since there is no dedicated memory unit at Riverwoods, Exeter, there are several residents in skilled nursing at Monadnock spending too much time staring out the window rather than being engaged in some beneficial activity. Monadnock is nearly 30 years old and almost impossible to update to today's standards without spending too much money. Suncook and Winnisquam, the nursing care facilities at the Ridge and the Boulders, are aging as well. Instead of trying to update 3 locations, why not build one new health center with all the latest features, including a state-of-the-art memory care unit? This new facility will not be ready for occupancy for several years, but the new village concept of building a small number of bedrooms with adjoining baths, central space for recreation is the way for the future. I expect to be a resident of this new healthcare facility at Riverwoods in the future. And that's signed Joan Caldwell. I have a second letter I'd like to read into the record. This was sent to one of my friends living at the Woods, but this is sent from Paul Hinchy, who lives at 16 Sandstone Way in Exeter, and that is one of the Boulders cottages. Dear sirs and madams, my wife and I have been residents at Riverwoods, Exeter for more than 5 years, living in a cottage at the Boulders campus. I'm writing to support the application by Riverwoods, Exeter to build and operate a centralized healthcare facility to replace the 3 dispersed healthcare units that currently serve our community. In reaching this conclusion, I have spoken with healthcare staff who confirmed the additional burdens that are imposed by the current dispersed structure and make recruitment and retention of nursing staff considerably more difficult. I've also spoken with an existing Boulders resident whose wife has been in the skilled nursing unit for several years. While he recognizes that a centralized healthcare unit would make it more difficult for him to visit his wife every day, since it would not be on the Boulders campus, perhaps, he also recognizes that the current structure is not sustainable, and the long-term quality care can only be assured if Riverwoods can create a centralized facility that offers greater flexibility and efficiency. I hope the zoning board will approve Riverwoods' application so that the project can move forward as quickly as possible. With best regards, Paul Hinchy. And I have just a few more comments to make. We sent you 140 letters. These included 3 letters from retired MDs, one of whom was a general surgeon here at Exeter Hospital. It also includes 3 letters from residents who have spouses in Monadnock and see the advantage of a combined healthcare center. We would love to be able to have the new healthcare center at the Woods. We've tried everything to find a place for that, to make it work. It can't work. We feel we are one community. Riverwoods Exeter is one community with 3 campuses, and we feel that the people of the Woods have an equal, if not larger, say in the decision, since we are twice as big as either the Ridge or the Boulders, and the oldest, and therefore, of course, the wisest of all. So, yes, we are hoping that there will be a centralized building as soon as possible because we are getting older, and I expect one of these days I will be an occupant in that building. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Deanna Graham. I am a resident of Exeter. I live at 5 Douglas Way, and I have been lucky enough to grow up in Exeter. I've lived here since I was 4 years old. I purchased a house a street over from where I grew up, and I'm honored to be a part of this community. I'm also honored to be an employee of Riverwoods, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement. And we pride ourselves. I don't think there's a resident here that is not a part of our programming. I know every single one here. We are a vibrant community, and we support each other, both residents and staff. And we support the community, the town of Exeter. And in this time, we need to support each other because things are changing. Ever since COVID, our staffing crisis, it's not going away, and we have to adapt. And this is one of the ways that we are coming around to adapt and give the best level of care to our residents, which they deserve. And the better care that they have, the more people come to Riverwoods, the more people come to this community, the more that we keep them healthy and vibrant and active, the more that they're going to participate in our community. So I think it's very important that we look beyond just parcels of land and heights and all of those different things and look at what this brings. This brings a level of care that Riverwoods is known for, that we're proud of, and that we want to continue. So I am a huge supporter of this, and thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bob Cully. I have lived at Boulders with my wife Ann for about the last 4 years. The Riverwoods campuses are separate home living communities. They aren't one big community that just free-flowingly interacts on all kinds of things. They're a separate community in each case, and they have all, I'm trying to eliminate some stuff that I wrote here, so bear with me. Boulders residents receive health care on the Boulders campus. And in the cases where they've gone off campus for health care, the people have always wanted to come back to Boulders because it's home. And the core nature of Riverwoods Exeter is that each campus is home for life. And that's what the people were shown and told when they came to Riverwoods, is that they would have a home campus with on-site health care. The traffic intersection at Route 1 in White Oak has been discussed some. And these healthcare that would move across the street, you still have the same traffic. The people are making, a turn the other way to get there. But you're not eliminating anything, and you're adding a lot of additional independent living residents in the woods. A centralized healthcare isolates the healthcare patients from the Boulders community. There's been some talk at the last meeting about transportation. There isn't anything remotely close to the type of transportation that would be needed to ferry people around. And at present, Riverwoods cannot pick up residents from the emergency room in the evening. There were some discussions about residents volunteering to pick up other residents and what have you. But a resident is left on their own in order to get back from the emergency room later in the evening. Point 3 on the criteria, substantial justice is done. It's not done. The Boulders residents have moved to Riverwoods with the understanding that lifetime health care would be provided there. And now, with an announcement in October of 21 at a resident council meeting, they were let know that consolidated health care is going to take place. Late in that meeting, somebody asked if there was going to be any resident input, and the answer was no. Again, I've been here at for 4 years now, and up until October of 21, I had never heard anything about going to consolidated health care. The existing ordinance that has served Riverwoods well and supported the success of Boulders and the other two campuses. The congregate health center design should not be eliminated based on general statements such as we'll offer the highest service and care objectives of efficient and effective health service for the multi-campus community may be impaired. The new health center will contain 4 fewer beds than the combined health centers of the 3 campuses. And that will create a problem at some point because there's going to be upwards of a 25% increase in the independent resident living population from all of the conversion of the existing health facilities to independent living facilities. I'm basing my numbers on Riverwoods documents and the last statement that we had that the campus crossing would be the preferred location for this, as opposed to the plan that was presented before that for the Ridge campus. So if it's going to campus crossing, you're going to have Ridge converted over to all the healthcare at Ridge converted over to independent living. The bottom line on that is Riverwoods currently has 149 healthcare units for 600 residents. The new consolidated health center will have 145, 4 fewer units for 750 residents rather than 600 residents. And again, my numbers are basically an extension of Riverwoods documents. The variance request is unreasonable based on a number of factors. Boulder's residents moved there with the expectation they'd provide lifetime health care. Any change from this commitment creates a reaction that consolidated health care is not from the residents, is not what we bought. We came here for the campus health care we were shown. And I've not met a single resident, new or resident in Boulders that has said that they understood that they were going to have to accept consolidated health care up until very recently. Any of the people we talked to, including the newer people coming in, would say, we never knew about this. This is a big change. Comments such as people can walk or ride a bike to visit a central facility just increases the lack of resident trust in a consolidated health care. Without a doubt, first-class health care is in everybody's best interest. There is basically no plan on how this will be achieved by eliminating the home campus health care. And magical thinking is not a plan. This has just been a concept is about all we get from time to time. One final comment coming back to this home issue. This is the Riverwoods Exeter Resident Handbook. It was just updated. All residents have one. It was just updated in January 23. And on pages 1-3 and 4, it describes, which were dated January 23, the pages state that the composition of the individual campuses, how many resident units, how many healthcare units, and concludes the discussion with the statement, quote, that the campuses function as individual neighborhoods within the Riverwoods Exeter community. Function as individual neighborhoods within the individual Riverwoods Exeter community. This is January of 23. I think it's in the best interest of Riverwoods and the surrounding Exeter town area that the variance request is denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Applicant will have a chance to respond to any comments. Would any other members of the public like to speak?
So wait, a big point. She's a representative of Riverwoods. I hate to do this, but you're not. You're not the public. I think the public has a right, excuse me, I better stand up, pardon me.
I'm an Exeter resident.
Oh, well then.
If she's an Exeter resident, she has the right to speak. I would note that the prior resident also indicated that they were a Riverwoods employee. And I would appreciate that be disclosed if that's the case. But if you're speaking as a member of the public, you're welcome to speak during this period.
Hi, my name is Tracy Jeffers. I live at 12 Ridgewood Terrace here in Exeter. I have lived in Exeter for the past 18 years, and I also am an employee for the past 6 years of Riverwoods Exeter. I would say that I hope that the board approves this variance. Riverwoods is a community. We have 3 campuses in one community. Our residents very much love their community. Our staff, as a staff member, I love the Riverwoods community. And I will say that change is hard. Change is really hard. And as much as many residents have appreciated having 3 health centers at each campus, we have had many, many discussions, and majority of our residents and staff understand, agree, and appreciate that this is needed in order to have a state-of-the-art facility, healthcare and quality care for our residents. This is what we need to do. So I just wanted to say that I definitely approve and appreciate this variance.
Thank you. Cameron, would you like to speak?
Yes, please. My name is Pete Cameron. I've been a resident of the Boulders since 2011. 2010, excuse me, my wife corrected me. I live at 15 Sandstone Way. I'm troubled. A couple things. First, Mr. Chairman, I thought we had discussed last hearing that we were going to have 2 parts of this. One part, okay, you're shaking your head, therefore, can we go and see what, oh no, never mind, I will not pursue this.
If I misled you, I apologize. My intent at the last meeting, just as with this meeting, is to hear both applications together. We will deliberate on them separately, and we will vote on them separately. But the applicant is given the choice of how they want to present. They presented them together. And quite frankly, I think given the number of speakers and the similarity of concerns, it makes the most sense to deal with these together. And I think it's the most efficient way to do it. Certainly, if you have specific concerns that you think differentiate the Boulders, I'd like to hear those, but most of what we've heard has really been similar concerns that really get to both variances. And so for the purposes of just efficiency and keeping the meeting moving, this is the way I've decided to proceed.
I respect that decision. Let me, however, say a couple of things. First, I do not believe that I've implied here that I'm against optimum of health care. I am concerned with what the board has to do, and that's to focus on the 5 criteria that are very explicitly set forth in the statute. And it's up to the board to determine whether Riverwoods has met, and I hate to use the word, but burden of proof. That's very clear, unequivocal. If in fact that's what you believe they have accomplished, then you could grant the variances. I'm not totally convinced, and you have in your record my letter of response where I went down criteria by criteria by criteria and tried to demonstrate something other than what Riverwoods was contending, what management of Riverwoods was contending. I don't think I need to reiterate what's in my letter. I'm sure that council and others have reviewed it and understand what it says. So therefore, I hope that we can proceed forward on that basis. It's all very fine and dandy to talk about what we need in the future, but we're today here to determine, have they met their burden of proof? Very simple, either they have or they haven't. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Roy Cheney. I'm a resident of Riverwoods at the Boulders. I've been there for a year and 9 months or so with my wife. And I would like to just stick with the variances and whether the burden of proof has been met. I am totally for first-class health care. That's why we're all there. And I believe that up till now, people have been getting first-class health care. There's no question about that. The variance request to relocate all health care to the Woods campus to a site which hasn't really been determined yet to my knowledge, but it will be across New Hampshire 111. It's contrary to public interest because it will create a serious public safety hazard at the intersection of Riverwoods Drive and New Hampshire 111. And secondly, it's going to alter the essential character of a small residential neighborhood adjacent to the Woods campus. The increase in automobile traffic driving back and forth across New Hampshire 111 by any and all Woods campus residents who want to see, visit, socialize, dine, or otherwise spend time with a loved one, a friend, or someone they care about will drastically increase the potential for accidents. And you can imagine what types of accidents they may be. Approximately 1/2 of the total number of Riverwood Exeter residents live at the Woods. 1/2 of the new health center, once it's operational, another 35 independent living units will be constructed at the Woods campus, further increasing the projected number of Woods residents who will have to travel back and forth across New Hampshire 111. Assuming that 140 plus healthcare beds will be built somewhere off-site of the Woods campus, we can expect about 70 plus healthcare residents will be from the Woods. We can, couples where one is in independent living and the other is in healthcare typically commute right now, and that commute is internal to the Woods building. And it's just, they just walk through the building. Just how many driving round trips a day that this would translate to is hard to quantify. But potentially 100, 200 crossings, one trip over is a trip back, that's 2 crossings. At this intersection might be reasonable. This was not part of the traffic study that was done by the consultant. He only looked at the current population and the workers and how they typically during the day travel in and out. There's very little traffic crosswise. at this point because the campuses, they may be one community, but they're three separate campuses. And there's very little interaction other than special events, large committee meetings for residents that happen where everyone gets together at one of the three sites. That's an infrequent happening. So we're creating a traffic hazard for our residents who cross the intersection and the general public that's driving along New Hampshire 111 pretty much any time of the day once their loved one is on the other side of the highway. Secondly, there's an increase in residential traffic that impacts everyone living not only on Riverwoods Drive but Hillside Avenue. That wasn't considered. I think the Riverwoods Drive residents were abutters, but the other road that leads off of that also has to travel through that intersection on Hillside was not included, and there's more homes down there. So I think it does impact that small, quiet residential neighborhood because there'll be a lot more traffic on that road. Okay, so with respect to both public safety and the alteration of the essential character of the immediate residential neighborhood, I respectfully submit that the requirements for granting this variance have not been met. Now, with the second variance request to permit skilled nursing care off-site from the Boulders campus, we're currently permitted as a, quote, elderly congregate care facility, congregate health care facility. Moving the skilled nursing off-site does not meet the requirement that substantial justice is done. Moving all healthcare off-site of the Boulders campus substantially changes the living environment for all of the current residents of the Boulders community. Physically separating loved ones and/or friends who have to transition from independent living into assisted living or a nursing home care at the new health center is distant into a standalone health center, consolidated health center, distant from the Boulders, is one, a violation of the understanding that all residents had prior to accepting residence at the Boulders. That understanding came from the sales marketing presentation that we all got and is reinforced in our contract with Riverwoods in the description of community section of our contract. There, the facilities are defined as individual campuses independently developed over time by name, Woods Ridge Boulders, with a number of independent living apartments and cottages, assisted living accommodations, skilled nursing beds, guest rooms, and common facilities available to residents at the specific campus community they contractually accepted to live in. Without health care on site, the Boulders will become a, quote, active adult community, and that is not what we signed a life care contract for. Secondly, social isolation from longtime friends and the loss of close physical and emotional contact with loved ones can be harmful to the health center residents as well as their independent living loved ones and friends. The physical connection and mental health benefits afforded by congregate health care cannot be duplicated in a standalone consolidated health center that is remote and no longer part of the independent living environment. For these reasons, substantial justice is not being done to impacted individuals, residents, and the request for a variance should not be approved. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ladies, my name is Ivor Freeman. I live at the Boulders. I've lived there for less than 2 years, but more than 1 year. I come to ask for guidance from you because I don't have enough information to know whether to support this or oppose it. The fact is that when the first proposal was made, the administration of Riverwoods had not caused a code inspection of Monadnock to determine that it could not be renovated to sufficient standing. And they decided that it would be expensive, it would be better to be all one unit. Now, as Mr. McHugh pointed out in his letter to you, Riverwoods can't expend a lot of money without finding another way of financing it. And the way that the administration has decided to finance it is by increasing the number of independent living units. That means that there will be more need for staff to accommodate those extra residents, and no logic or presentation has been made as to how many nursing staff will be saved by having a unique place, and secondly, how many extra staff would be needed to accommodate with the normal housekeeping, dining, maintenance, etc. for the new residents. So I don't know whether to support it or oppose it, and I don't know if you do either. Certainly when everybody who's now a resident signed in to become a resident, it was their absolute understanding that the healthcare would be in the same campus that they were living in. And the fact is that Riverwoods Exeter is slightly more expensive than other places, and people determined that as this is unique to be in the same campus all the time, they were willing to pay the extra money. But that is now being changed in this proposal, and I'm not sure that it's a viable situation from the residents' point of view to be in that situation. I think that that's my situation, and I hope you will understand what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak, any other member of the public like to speak on either application? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the applicant to come back up and address any comments and make any closing statements you'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I said when I first stood up here, I think the challenge for the board tonight is going to be to weigh the evidence presented based strictly on your jurisdiction and the legal criteria, and not to base it on some of the emotional items that have been presented tonight. In doing so, we've heard some comments tonight about the fact that we have not met our burden of proof, and some references are made to some of the comments in the letters. I would suggest to you, however, that the objections in their discussions about the variance criteria have not described those variance criteria accurately under New Hampshire law. And specifically, they have not described those accurately under the criteria relative to public purpose, spirit and intent, diminution of property values, and hardship. In the discussion, there's lots of talk about whether this is against the public purpose, and that's referenced in the most generic of terms. And as you well know, as board members, that the New Hampshire law is quite clear on the fact that the public interest, the test is whether something the variance is going to be not contrary to the public interest, and you measure that by whether the variance is going to unduly and to a marked degree violate the relevant ordinance's basic zoning objectives. And as I pointed out in my materials, the basic zoning objective of the zoning ordinance that we are talking about is to ensure that the health care service that is provided is not across town. but it's at the locality. And I think this ordinance was created many, many years ago, back in the late 80s or the early 90s. And I think probably, and I have to confess, I haven't gone back to try to find the minutes, but I think probably what they were concerned about is to create an assisted living facility with somewhere way off site, out of sight, out of mind, a healthcare component to this. And so, in my view, the basic zoning objective is to make sure that the health care that's going to be provided is not far away, but it is right in the heart of this thing. And I think that if you look, this board's job is to look at the actual variance criteria and not at the inaccurate criteria that's referenced in some of these opposition letters. The other half, and I just use this by way of example, of the variance criteria under the public interest component is whether or not the variance is going to alter the essential character of the locality or whether it's going to threaten public health, safety, or welfare. That doesn't really reflect some of the many comments that have been made by the abutters. This is not going to alter the essential character of the locality because Riverwoods is still going to be there. It's still going to have health care, it's still going to have assisted living, it's still going to have independent living, and the residential perimeter of the facility will still be there. One of the things, and I might as well jump to this right now, some of the comments that were made were about traffic. And I went back after this last meeting, because I know some of the questions were raised, and I took a look at that traffic study that was prepared by Steve Pernaugh. And it very clearly says that it is prepared solely for the purpose of studying the impact of the 35 potential independent living units that might be there. It doesn't purport to study the impact of having a centralized health system. And the only reason that report is even in there is that when we first started this exercise back in the summer, we thought we were going to need to have to come in to get a variance for those independent living units at the Woods. It turns out we didn't, and with the wisdom of hindsight, I probably should have taken that traffic report out of the materials. But the bottom line is, and again, as this board well knows, this traffic issue is going to be examined and vetted 6 ways to Sunday, if and when this variance is granted, and if we get to go on to the planning board. And at that time, a traffic study will be done and will be submitted to the planning board, which will study the impacts of traffic both internally at the Woods, internally at the Boulders and the Ridge, and also externally going across the road and also impacting the abutters. So I just wanted to explain that, and obviously, the planning board is the one that has the jurisdiction for that, not this board. In addition to the fact, and I just use that by way of example, there were other misstatements in the parts of the objectives or the objections by the abutters. In addition, however, to the fact that their arguments are based upon inaccurate reads of what the variance criteria are all about, there are actual factual inaccuracies in many of their comments. For example, some of the more recent batch of letters that came in indicated that there was concern about the fact that there was not going to continue to be a mini health center on each campus. We talked about that at the last time, and I kind of half-jokingly said that it was the school nurse. We took great pains at that last meeting to indicate that service of having a presence, a nursing presence at each of the campuses will remain, and yet some of the letters that we see here tonight say that that's going to go away. So I want this board to understand that some of these things are simply inaccurate. Another point that was made is that the nursing shortage is being either exaggerated by us or it's a temporary situation. That is absolutely factually inaccurate. I think that Ellen Kingsbury spoke to it much more accurately than I ever could, and we spent a lot of time talking about this on December 20th. But I just want to put into context some of the comments that were made tonight and talk about some of the demographics here that I think this board needs to take into account. So at a recent hospital association meeting, there was some evidence that was presented on the ratio of the young to old. In other words, young is 20 to 64, old is 65 and over. Apparently, I've passed into that marker a couple of months ago myself, but that's another issue. These statistics indicate that that ratio in 1950 was 7.2. In 2001, it had decreased all the way to 4.1. By 2050, it's going to decrease to 2.1. In other words, for every person such as myself, there's only going to be 2.1 young person to take care of me by 2050. The statistics also indicated that in 2030, the total population is going to expand by 9%. The working age population will expand by less than 5%. A couple of other interesting points. In a December 14th press conference, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, regardless of what you may think of him, pro or con, he made a couple of very interesting statements about the labor force. He said, our labor force should be 3.5 million people more than it is. And there's lots of easy ways to get it to bigger numbers than that if you go back a few years. He offers some explanations, people retiring, people dying because of COVID, et cetera, but at the end of his comments, he concludes by stating, if you ask businesses, pretty much everybody you talk to says there aren't enough people. We need more people. So, 2 points here. Number one, we have not an awful lot of young people to take care. Number two, we don't have people who are working. And number three, and I think this is probably the most critical piece, in a recent report by the McKinsey & Company, there was a statement made that the country may see a nursing shortage of between 200,000 and 450,000 registered nurses by 2025 if the healthcare stakeholders and federal leaders do not take action to address the dwindling workforce, according to a report by McKinsey & Company. So that is evidence, not made up by Riverwoods, by independent sources, and that, I think, provides a very telling context to you about the fact that this shortage, this situation is real. It's not in the minds of Riverwoods, and it's not being done, as was alluded to here earlier, as a money-making venture in order to move forward with a particular decision that we may have made. The next point that I'd like to make is that there have been a number of opinions expressed here, but what's not been expressed is any sort of contrary evidence. Lots of opinions, and as this board well knows, when you have evidence presented to you, and I would suggest it in this context, that evidence consists of the opinion of Mark McCauley, that when it comes to issues about contracts, there's a New Hampshire case called Condos East, which basically says that the evidence that's presented cannot, pure opinion cannot supersede that evidence. So I think that the evidence that you've heard in the form of this letter really has to trump all the other opinion evidence, and to do otherwise would be erroneous. There have been a couple of statements also about the impact of marketing statements or statements made during the course of the marketing efforts, and whether that plays any role in contracts. And I would just suggest to you very briefly that under New Hampshire law, there's a concept known as parole evidence, and basically what that says is that the evidence or any kind of comments that were made in conjunction with marketing is not considered part of this residential service agreement. So I just wanted to get that out there. One of the last things I want to say is that the most, I think, egregious treatment in the abutters' comments about the variance criteria is in the substantial benefit piece. Number one, we don't really have comments from the public except for a few tonight. No comments from the Ridge. We do have over 140 voices from the Woods in support and believe that the proposal would be of great benefit to them. At the last meeting, I know Laura Davies had asked whether or not Riverwoods had conducted a poll. We indicated we haven't. However, I think that what the numbers suggest, at least as presented here tonight, is that we have something in the order of 600 residents. We have 140 people who support. We have another 20 from the Boulders who have signed a petition in opposition, and we have at least 10 or so from the Boulders in opposition. So draw from that whatever you will, but I think that there's a good indication that there's a solid basis of support for this and not just opposition. Now, the key factors that were cited in the letters of opposition really are based upon, I would say, two things when you strip it all down. One is a concern about the impact that it's going to have on people who are not in the healthcare center to be able to visit those who are in the healthcare center. We talked a lot about last time about whether somebody can walk down the hall to see their spouse and so forth. The other thing I heard a lot about was the uncertainty of transportation in order to effectuate the goal of being able to get from where anyone's living to where the healthcare center is. And I would suggest to you that this particular criteria needs to be looked at in terms of the actual language of the criteria, which is whether or not a benefit to the applicant of granting the variance will be outweighed by a detriment or loss to the individual. And so what you're doing is that you're weighing pros and cons, those two things, the benefit to the applicant versus any detriment or loss. And it's not simply a question of looking at, degrees of discomfort which may be expressed tonight. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that is not considered a detriment or a loss. Now, before I get to that, I just want to describe very briefly for the record the benefit to the applicant is moving forward with what it has determined as part of its management obligations and its due diligence will provide the best care possible. That means consistent staff, not a revolving door, not the use of the temporary agencies that we're forced to use right now, so that if your mother or my mother is in the assisted living, they have a consistency and a continuity of the same faces and not the disruption that may face in terms of not having that. It also, as we talked about last time, it will provide a lot of amenities. We've heard some comments tonight too. We're going to have a memory care component to this, which is not present right now. And that is going to provide an absolute benefit, not only to the applicant of Riverwoods Company per se, but also to the constituent elements of that. One other aspect of this too is that, we've heard about the disruption of having to, instead of going down the hall, having to visit somebody, to go to another building. However, what's lost in this discussion, and we've tried to relay this to the board, and I just want to repeat this, is that we are consciously trying to design this in such a way that hopefully the people who are doing the visiting will want to spend more time in the assisted living instead of racing back to their units. And in order to accomplish that, we are doing things in the active planning stage right now. If I can find my little thing. Where did this go to? Naturally it disappears when I'm looking for it. But I can just tell you briefly, what we are talking about is making larger rooms, possibly having guest bedrooms so that if you have a spouse over there, you can take a nap, spend the night, whatever you want to do. It's going to include much better services for memory care and so forth. So what we are actively trying to do as part of our design routine is to create a different sort of environment, so that if I wanted to go down and visit my husband who was in assisted living, I would instead go across the street to be able to do that and be present in a setting which is much more welcoming and much more inviting, and I'd want to hang out there longer, frankly. So that's what the thinking is, and when we talk about The loss, I would suggest to you that it's not a loss. It's simply a different manner of delivering the same and possibly even a better level of service. I do also want to touch upon the fact that the question about whether or not a poll was conducted. We haven't done that. But at the same time, one of the things that's not been spoken about here tonight, or even at the last meeting, is that the decisions that get made at Riverwood, this isn't a condo association. It's not a situation where 600 people get together with a board of directors and they vote on how they want the thing to operate. That's not what we're talking about here. This is run by a nonprofit operator and professional managers. The board has a fiduciary duty to all the residents, both current and future, and we would suggest to you that this management and the way that it's done needs to be taken into account when we talk about these issues here. In terms of the loss or the detriment to individuals, as I've talked about before, it's this sense that they can't go and visit, and a sense of disappointment that the method of the providing care that they thought they were going to get may not actually happen now. We don't think that these things are loss or detriment, as that term is used in the variance criteria. I would point out that some of the people who have spoken here tonight and in the letters are in fact living at the Boulders in cottages, which is a term for having their own standalone house. So they're not going to be impacted by this at all, because they're going to have to leave their house in order to get wherever their spouse is or their friend or whatever. And as I mentioned before, we think the fact that there's going to be the design of this with larger, more welcoming rooms is going to allay any sort of sense of diminution in the service provided by not being able to walk down the hall. In terms of the transportation element, which we fully recognize that that's an issue and that we have to do that. And what I would suggest with that, so that this board can get some degree of comfort, and also that the residents can get some degree of comfort, we will commit, if this variance is granted, and we are prepared to go to the planning board for a site plan approval, we will have, as part of our planning board submittal materials, after having worked with the resident council, which is a council composed of residents, which provides their input, et cetera, and/or a task force, however it's going to get set up, we will come up with a transportation plan so that people and the town boards can have some assurance that if I want to go to the Central Healthcare Center and visit my husband, I'm going to have a means to get there. And that's what we will commit to doing.
To clarify that, is your suggestion that be part of the planning board review process, is to review the transportation plan?
Well, yes, what we're suggesting is that we will commit tonight so that this board and the residents don't understand that we're just going to put it on the back burner and deal with it 5 years from now. We will commit to the fact that we are going to have a plan in consultation with the residents that we will present at the planning board for their review. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes.
Clear up? Okay.
Yes.
So one of the last things I want to talk about is this sense of disappointment. And again, I don't think that that's a detriment or a loss. There's no guaranteed right to a particular manner of health care. And I know I mentioned this the last time, but I think it bears repeating. Riverwoods has, as a matter of right, the ability to merge the Boulders lot and the Ridge lot, meaning that one facility could be created for both of those campuses, and we would be completely within our legal right to be able to do that. So this notion that somehow there's something that we're doing, we're not taking away a legal right. We are simply asking this board to recognize that we want to move forward with this proposal, And I would also, we are sensitive to the fact that there is a sense of, voiced by some people, of disappointment. And I would express to this board that we would encourage these people to confer with Riverwoods. And we are happy to explore a variety of options, individually tailored, in order to try to address that disappointment. But at the end of the day, that issue is not within this board's jurisdiction. The only thing that's within this board's jurisdiction is whether or not we satisfy the criteria, and I think we do. So with that, I know Kim wants to, I think she still wants to say a couple of words.
May I ask a couple?
Oh, of course, I'm sorry.
So I thought I understood the proposal as a consolidation of skilled nursing beds. But between the letters and your comments tonight, I'm now beginning to understand that this is to also include all assisted living in the healthcare center as well?
Well, the health center, yes, the health center is a term used which references both assisted living and skilled nursing. And I think that is pretty clear in the materials, but if it's not,
It's really not. And I guess I'm kind of shocked that assisted living won't exist in either of the other campuses anymore, because that's a pretty big difference than what I understood the proposal to be. Maybe I've misread it, but it was, I thought, meant to be specifically for skilled nursing beds.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think that we were pretty clear that, let me just see here. Bear with me just 2 seconds.
There was a lot of material, so
No, I understand.
May have lost track of some aspects of it, but
If you read the agenda, first item does reference skilled nursing specifically.
well,
So, Laura, if I may, part of the confusion may be because of the terminology in the ordinance. So if the ordinance itself, and I have it kicking around here somewhere, but the terminology itself of the ordinance.
would you like the definition of elderly congregate care? Because I have it right here.
The ordinance talks about a nursing home facility as needing to be on the same lot as the service.
Lifetime supportive services at each stage of a senior's life. The facility is intended for persons 55 years of age or older, which provides on-site nursing home facilities as licensed by the state of New Hampshire. So I didn't see in the application a real clear line that all assisted living as well as skilled nursing was going to be consolidated into one place.
Well, they all are, well, right now, on each of the campuses, each health center, as that term is used, consists of assisted living and skilled nursing care, okay? And we've tried to differentiate the terminology in the application materials, and I think we also discussed it extensively at the last meeting that we were at, and talked about the fact that what we intended to as well do was to incorporate memory care as part of our proposal.
No, I did understand that.
Which is separate and apart, of course, from skilled nursing. So I don't think that there's ever, I mean, right now, each campus has as a package already the assisted living and the skilled nursing home. Perhaps we tailored some of the terminology in here to the nursing home language because that's what's in the ordinance. But it never was the intention that we were only going to have one centralized pod for skilled nursing and leave everything else the way it was. Okay. That would be contrary to the entire purpose of this, which is to try to centralize everything in order to increase the efficiencies of things.
So what is the total number of units in the healthcare facility then?
I'm going to ask Justine to come up because she'll get it right. Yep. So there are currently 150 plus or minus healthcare beds, so that's including assisted living and nursing. And while we do not have the final number yet for what the centralized building will be, based on our actuarial report from 2021 and based on our existing population, we need about 111 of those 150 units.
For what?
For assisted living and nursing. So our existing actuarial study says that our residents, basically, over the course of time, based on the existing population, will need 111 of 150.
And is that, sorry to interrupt, and that's based on the current number of residential
current
units?
population.
So that doesn't account any increased units?
That's correct. So we have essentially 39 units more than we need. Today, we sell those to the outside world, people who aren't our contractual residents, and they pay market price instead of a discounted price. So as we look to the future, some combination of, we need about 27% of the IL population at any point in time. So what we will do is size the new health center to be appropriate for our population, not the outside world. And that's a combination of a few things. One is, frankly, we want to serve fewer people because it allows us to need fewer healthcare workers. And secondly, just being able to fit what we want to fit in the new healthcare center, the amenities, the space, larger spaces for apartments and rooms, the separate facilities, the separate fitness facilities and common spaces and things that will draw people in. It just doesn't allow for the space to have 150 units, but we will not undersize that. We'll size it to what our actuaries say is appropriate, and we think we have that number set.
So it's going to be 150?
No, it will be less than 150.
It will be less,
Yeah.
okay.
But it will be appropriate based on what the actuaries tell us will be appropriate for our current population, plus whatever additional independent living units we need to add.
And you're not going to really differentiate between assisted living and skilled nursing?
We will. So it's the science is, the actuarial science will tell us you need this many assisted living and this many nursing beds. It gets into a little bit of art between how you break those out. So long as we'll make sure we have the right total number. And then there is a little bit of art in terms of, because it's not like I could look at you and say, you need assisted living, or you need memory support, or you need nursing care. There are ways you evaluate that, but folks will stay a little bit longer in assisted living. They might move directly into nursing care. It's that part gets...
My experience is there's kind of a big difference between assisted living and
for sure.
skilled nursing.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of trying to get you to explain if you're going to have a certain number of assisted living units and a certain number of skilled nursing units. And it doesn't sound like...
Well, we will have...
You're there yet.
The number of skilled nursing units that our actuaries say is appropriate. We will have the number of assisted living units that our actuaries say is appropriate. What gets a little bit squishy is that you're talking about what level of care you provide versus what it's licensed at. So you could provide, if you need a higher level of care, but you're living in assisted living or you're living in a memory support bed, but now you need a higher level of care, we can provide that to you and not make you move to a different level of care. So that's where it gets a little bit different. So I can't give you an exact number today. Obviously, we'll have that when we get to the planning board. But what I am saying is that what it will be based on is an actuarial report. So when I look at what our actuarial report from 2021 says, what we're projecting fits within that.
Okay.
So we're taking assisted living units out because there are people who live in assisted living today who would prosper more in memory support. Since we're adding that level of care, we're moving some things around. Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Ask again, because I want to make sure you understand.
I guess I thought that there was a more specific plan for the number of healthcare beds and the number of assisted living and the number of skilled nursing. And it sounds like it's not, that plan will be developed, but it's not there yet.
Well, what I can tell you is what we started out with is projecting 144, and that gave us 36 memory support. It gave us 20 skilled nursing beds. It gave us 60 what we call assisted living 2, which is essentially not skilled. There's a difference between nursing care and skilled nursing. Skilled nursing is Medicare certified. And whatever the remainder is, I've lost the number, like 24 or 28 assisted living apartments. That may adjust because it's more than we need. And so some of those may be a little bit lower based on our desire to have larger units for our residents to live in and larger common spaces, but it won't adjust any lower than what our actuaries tell us is the minimum we need. And that would be based on today's population plus whatever the projection is for folks who would move in the future with additional independent living units.
Okay.
Okay.
And your existing population plus the 35 independent living units that you're intending to add will be the base for all these calculations.
Yeah, and there will actually probably be more independent living units because by moving healthcare out of the Boulders and the Ridge and the Woods, it allows us the opportunity to make the Boulders and the Ridge additional independent living units too. So what we'll do is we'll take existing population plus whatever number of additional independent living units we add. That will be the number that the actuaries use to calculate the appropriate size for healthcare.
Okay. This is getting more squishy as I'm hearing about. I thought there was a plan for 35 additional
At the Woods.
So
units at the
initially,
Woods.
right, correct. That's at the Woods campus. So initially, we had 2 variances that we had anticipated needing. One, we don't have a variance need. If we add independent living units at the Ridge or the Boulders, we're within our density, that we didn't need a variance for that. So we were only asking for a variance for the Woods, but then as it turned out, we didn't need a density variance there either. So that's why that's even mentioned.
Okay.
And it's been withdrawn.
And it's been withdrawn.
Okay.
I did want to clarify, because it was something that I didn't think was, there were some questions in some of the letters. The new facility, healthcare facility, will be at the Ridge, just in a different location than is current?
That's right. What we're proposing, what we're working on is it will be on the Ridge parcel.
Yes.
We have an office building where our administrative staff, some of our centralized staff sits now. It will be, what we're proposing, what we're designing, and what we'll bring to the planning board is a location there, not connected to the Ridge. We initially brought that concept to the residents to replace the Ridge Healthcare with a larger healthcare building, and that was not well received by the resident population, so we went back to the drawing board.
But it will be on the Ridge parcel?
On the Ridge parcel, correct.
But not attached to the Ridge building.
That's correct. And that
So
was based on...
It will be a separate building.
It will be a distinct building, correct. And that was based on the resident reaction to it being part of the Ridge parcel. They preferred it in this other location.
Okay. Didn't know that either from the last
Anything else?
one. Okay.
No.
So
I'm sorry. I didn't have any more questions. Did either of you?
So one thing I would just say is the zoning variance that we speak to, the requirement is that we have a nursing home in the buildings. So every time we came for the Woods, and the Ridge, and the Boulders, we were granted the special exception because we had a nursing home. And we've come to you to ask for that variance at the Woods and at the Boulders because there will no longer be a nursing home there. So I think that may have been your confusion.
But there's not going to be one within the building at the Ridge either.
That's
Sounds
correct.
like
It'll
it's
be
going
on
to
the
be on the parcel,
Ridge
but not
parcel.
within the building.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the reality is, our folks talk about the disappointment with that. And we hear that. I understand it's not part of the legal thing, but I would want the board to understand we know that. But we have to weigh what's right for any one individual and what's best in any one instance with what's right for the whole for the long term. And for the long term, centralizing our health care, that is assisted living, memory support, and skilled nursing. That's putting up a new building that provides the kind of life and amenities that our folks who live in healthcare can live their best life. We will handle all of the details, the transportation, the in and out. We'll make that work. We have to. We owe that to our residents. But we have to centralize our healthcare to be able to be an ongoing, successful organization for the long term.
Thank you. I'm not going to take any, public comment is closed.
Did you want to say something?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you say that public comment was closed.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pryor, you know exactly how this board works. We let the public speak. I gave every member of the public the option to speak. The applicant has a chance to make closing remarks.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address the board for one moment.
You may not, Mr. Pryor. You may not. You're a recused board member. You had an opportunity to speak during the public comment. I have asked for everyone to speak. The applicant gets a chance to respond and close their presentation.
Thank you. My name is Kim Gaskell. I'm currently the Vice President of Operations for the Riverwoods Group and serving as the Interim Executive Director for Riverwoods Exeter. I will try to make this very brief because I know that you've heard a lot tonight. But what I would really want to drive home is something that Justine and Sharon have both touched on in what they have just said, in that we are an organization and in a community that does involve our residents in so many of our decisions and so many processes along the way. And so that doesn't always mean, as Sharon pointed out, that they are the ultimate decision maker in how these things move forward, but it does not mean that we're not communicating and involving them. And so to Mr. Cully's point, he may have heard about that for the first time in October of 2021, but an idea and a conversation has to start somewhere. And that doesn't mean that we've not done our due diligence to evaluate whether or not this was worth moving forward as a community, as an organization, and for our residents. You have to start that conversation somewhere. And when you just heard the point about that the initial plan was to have it attached to the Ridge community, and resident feedback is what caused us to reevaluate that. And that was right around the time that I came on board in August. We initially brought forth this design, and that would have been more of a detriment to our residents because the current residents in healthcare at the Ridge would have had to have moved twice. It would mean that while we were constructing a new healthcare facility somewhere, we'd have to move them off-site to another one of our health centers and then move them again. That's more of a detriment. By moving forward with what we're proposing to have this on the Ridge parcel in this location, it means we can construct it all at once and move all of our healthcare residents when needed. It is less of a disruptor to them. And in terms of how we've involved our residents, we have had design charrettes where we've brought in our architects. We've had a dedicated email address where residents can submit their feedback, what they want to see in the new building, questions. We just recently printed out all of those comments. We have over 44 pages of typed submissions from residents of what they're hoping to see in this, and ideas, suggestions, programming. We've outlined to our residents that they'll be a part of task forces led by them to help us solve some of these challenges like transportation or landscape or program they want to see. We are a very inclusive community, which we are relaying all of this information to our residents. from board representation, I know we didn't hear from Mr. Brownell tonight. As an organization, Riverwoods has 5 resident trustees that are full board members. We are an inclusive community. We are one Riverwoods Exeter, and we need to move forward with one healthcare facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. With that, I am going to close the public session and go into deliberations. Any comments from the board members?
Having trouble?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we're just going on the criteria as both the applicant's representative and the members of the public have repeatedly urged us to do, and which we would do anyway, then I think we should just go through the criteria.
Okay.
And talk about it, not just tick it off.
I agree. Would you like to take us through?
All right. For variance criteria, the first requirement is that the variance is not contrary to the public interest, often taken with the second criteria that the spirit of the ordinance is observed. The proposed use must not conflict with the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance and must not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, threaten public health, safety, or welfare, or otherwise injure public rights. So I think the ordinance is clear that there has to be a nursing facility associated with these communities, and although they like to call it one community, it's 3 parcels on 2 sides of a state route, and it cannot be, even with a vote of the board or whatever, it cannot be tied together as a single entity.
Well, it is tied together as a single entity, not as single parcels.
As a corporate entity, but not as a real estate entity.
Well, they could tie the ownership together. I mean, I understand. I understand. This is contrary to the ordinance and to the language of the definition, which is why they're here for the variance. The question in my mind, and it really just gets back to, this does sound to me like this is the separate campuses of a single community. They are separate in some ways, but it's clear to me based on what's been presented by both the applicant and several of the members of the public that there is significant overlap, and certainly significant overlap. I mean, overlap in ownership, overlap in activities. And so the question in my mind is, does this ultimately meet the spirit of the ordinance by providing nursing facilities as part of the overall, as part of the overall facility, the overall Riverwoods? I know it's not what certainly the members of the public here were looking for, and what they bought into, and I think they've got a valid argument, and I think they've got a real right to be upset. But ultimately, we can't pass judgment on what their contract says or what was marketed to them. We have to set that aside. They may have separate claims, but before us is just whether this meets the criteria, and I think it does. I mean, when you talk about, does it conflict to a marked degree? We have a healthcare, nursing facility that is supporting, one directly adjacent campus with, the same ownership, with certainly overlapping infrastructure, overlapping management, and then another, which is across 111, which doesn't make it more difficult, but is nearby. That one raises more questions for me with respect to public health and safety, because there is that road crossing. But if I try to divorce myself from the emotional issues raised, which again, I understand, and I fully understand that people are, why people would be upset by
I don't even think it's fair to call them emotional issues.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
That's a really, people use that, and it's a pejorative term. It's not emotional issues. These are lifestyle and, practical issues.
That's fair, and I think I apologize for that, because that's not, I think these are valid concerns, and I think the folks that have spoken here have a right to be upset. I just think it's outside of to me, it's a contractual question, and it's not one we can wade into.
I agree that what it says in their contract and what they were promised in marketing is not our purview. I do think it still has, I have trouble with it as a real estate and as a zoning issue, though. Not related to the promises that were made to the residents when they purchased. I still have trouble with that. This provision in the ordinance was created for Riverwoods. They're the only use in town that has availed themselves of this provision. It was created for them. They have been under it for, I guess, 30 years, and created the 3 campuses as a progressive growth, and they're beautiful campuses. I understand the very real need for trying to figure out a practical solution to the shortage of healthcare workers. I don't think it's something we can resolve with a variance, and I don't understand how it fits, that it's not contrary to the public interest and that the spirit of the ordinance is observed, because the ordinance is clear that the purpose of this special exception of elderly congregate care is to have the levels of care available to the residents within the same facility. To me, that's the heart of what...
Well, it says, what the definition says is the same site, not the same facility. And there is a difference. It does not have to be attached, as I know it is currently, but it does not have to be attached to meet the definition, which is why the Ridge, no variance is required. I guess I'm more comfortable with considering the 3 campuses as a site, which is not defined, given the overlapping administration, the interconnectedness. I will say I think this would be much easier if some of this, the transportation issues, some of these issues were more fleshed out.
That's the problem I'm having, is there's things that have been mentioned that we'll figure it out. We can have security do it on weekends, but security is also who responds to if somebody pushes their button. So now security is driving somebody, somebody's pushed their button, who's going to respond to that? Like, there's so many little details that I think need to be fleshed out to prove that having it centralized isn't going to, it's going to be inconvenient to go over there, it's going to be a pain to get on a bus, but I haven't been shown that the people who live within those 3 units are still going to have the same level of safety and care that they have now, with people doing jobs to make sure everything works out. That's where I'm having an issue.
And there is a labor shortage that's, it's acute for healthcare, but it's also acute for other aspects. There's food service and housekeeping, and they're all
bus
labor,
drivers.
and transportation people are part of the labor shortage. And I guess for us to do a permanent change in the only use that avails itself of this provision it's a big change, affects a lot of people, and then what's to stop the shortage of transportation workers from being another zoning change or another variance request? I just don't know how a variance is going to address a management and a workforce problem. I don't see it as being the appropriate tool to address that.
Well, I think it makes sense to give the applicant some flexibility to manage that. Again, this is, I do think it is unique circumstances here, because these are two adjacent, 3 nearby campuses that are all centrally administered. Yeah. So, I get it, and I think it gets down to, what was the intent of this provision? Did it intend for there to be only these distinct, smaller, distinct facilities based on the lots, or does it contemplate a larger? I think if these were all adjoining, it would be a much easier decision. They are not.
It would.
And so I'm trying to think about, well, what makes a difference? One is certainly the 111 crossing. But if I step back from, and try to just look at this if for any other project, would I find that there is a health and safety risk for crossing, related to crossing Route 111 without having a traffic study? I'd like to have one, but I also understand that this is a constant battle between ZBA and planning board. It's hard to, you don't want to spend that money up front before it will go to planning board, and frankly, planning board is in a much better position.
I understand that. I don't think the traffic study would really solve it for me anyway, so.
Well, I don't think the traffic study would, but I think what could, and what gives me a little bit of comfort, is that the planning does have the ability to put, which I don't think we can foresee, they can put conditions in, road and intersection improvements, those types of things that will, I think, have much more. I frankly don't think the traffic is going to be a huge issue based on numbers, but the back and forth may be, and that's where some infrastructure improvements could help, but that's a planning issue.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by infrastructure improvements, but.
I don't think we'd put a light, but whether, I don't know what the current intersection is there, or some of those, whether it's more signage, I don't think you justify putting like a light in, but those types of things.
I think there's a flashing light
There's a
now.
flashing light there.
So you could put an actual light. Again, I don't think you would probably do that, but something like that, or you could do something.
DOT might have something to say about that.
Or you could tie it into emergency services. That's the type of thing I mean. And I don't know how you do it because we don't have the engineering.
No.
But planning board will.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next criteria then. I think we've thoroughly discussed that one. Unless you had more? No?
No.
Okay.
No.
So, item 3, substantial justice is done. The benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by harm to the general public or other individuals. I honestly think that the applicant is genuinely trying to solve a problem. I don't think that they're not, trying to do good management. I also think that independent units are more profitable and easier to manage than either assisted living or skilled. And I think consolidation of those units would be a benefit to management from that standpoint as well. But I think their overriding concern is longevity and figuring out how to serve their community. I just don't know that this proposal as a zoning variance is going to solve the problems of management and of workforce. It's to me, we're tasked with what the zoning is and what the request to change it is, and so I think that there would be potentially harm to other individuals based on this proposal, because they will have a change in, this is their final investment in their life. They've very difficult, very high bar to make a change at this point in their lives. They've made their investment. They're not in a place where they want to be making changes. And this is a big change to what I think many residents that bought in wanted. So, that weighs on me. I know it weighs on everybody here. I'm not suggesting that, but it weighs, as a zoning issue, I feel we have to take that
I think this will fix one big issue, but there's 50 other issues that are going to come behind it too. So it's not the... I guess I think those other issues that are going to come up, I'd feel better if I knew there was some sort of plan in line for it, and there's not, and that's what's making me hesitant.
Well, it honestly seems like the whole thing is a little bit in flux. We don't have any hard numbers on we don't have a design, we don't have I think we have a location now, although it wasn't clearly understood by me at least until tonight, that that's where it was going to go. It seems like there is a lot of concerning details that are not known yet.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see more details. I think I'm in the big picture. I can live with it given the proposed or suggested the conditions by the applicant, which is that the transportation plan, that was a big one for me, but that be part of the planning board application and reviewed, vetted by the planning board, that there will be certainly traffic will be considered. And I do understand that they need this first approval before they can do major investment in design, and that is going to drive the number, that's going to drive the overall, size, number of units, and they do seem to have, there's a formula at play. I'd like to see it be more, less squishy, but I understand why it is in this case. And actually the number of nursing units first, that I was comforted I was fine by the end of that conversation, because I think we're not talking about a huge number of swing.
Well, I know in the past there's been issues with getting people who are residents where they need to be too. I've seen that firsthand. So that worries me too, going, we don't need them, but I know there's been points where people have been moved around because they didn't have enough. So
have enough what?
Assisted living beds or skilled living beds. When, say, somebody's released from the hospital and they need skilled living, there's nowhere for them to go because they're all full.
Okay.
So now you're bringing the number of beds down because the actuaries say you don't need that many, but sometimes you do. So it is good to have extras in my thought.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You don't want too many, yes, because it's going to cost you extra money and everything, but at the same time, you do need to make sure that if somebody falls and breaks a hip and they need to come back to skilled, you have a place to put them.
Right. Sure. On the other hand, that is a reason in my mind to provide flexibility as to how you provide and where you provide this. But, and again, on this one, I would say, based on the substantial justice, the question is whether the benefit of the applicant is not outweighed by harm to the general public. And so, again, it doesn't have to be a benefit to the general public. It just can't outweigh the harm. In my mind, I think this is met. I think it is the applicant has shown that there's a benefit to them. It may not solve all the problems, but I think that they have identified an issue. And this is an approach, an attempt to fix it. And, it's hard to determine whether, what the ultimate weight is to the public. I think when you're looking at residents only, again, we've had a lot of, vocal opponents speak to us, but we also have the counter of...
We do.
So to me, that ends up being kind of a wash.
This one I can agree with. I can see that they're meeting that in terms of...
I don't feel it's a clear one, but I don't feel it's overwhelmingly one way or the other either. So I can agree with you that there's room to agree on that one, maybe. But it is certainly not clear cut.
Yeah.
All right, so item 4. The values of surrounding properties are not diminished. I don't even think we really need to go into this. I'm not worried about this.
No, I don't think there's been no testimony or evidence either
No,
way.
I don't think it's going to hurt any property values. And then 5, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Unnecessary hardship means because of special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. A, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of the provision to the property. And that the proposed use is a reasonable one. So, and then alternatively, unnecessary hardship means that owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance.
Yeah, I think that last one, we know that's not the case because it's currently being used in conformity.
Right. So in the explanation column, the applicant must establish that the property is burdened by the zoning restriction in a manner that is distinct from other similarly situated property, which I'm having trouble seeing that. A, determine the purpose of zoning restriction in question. The applicant must establish that because of the special conditions of the property, the restriction as applied to the property does not serve that purpose in a fair and substantial way. And then B, the applicant must establish that the special conditions of the property cause the proposed use to be unreasonable. Or to be reasonable, sorry. The use must not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So this is a lot to unpack, but I'll finish reading the paragraph then. As an alternative to A and B above, the applicant can satisfy the unnecessary hardship requirement by establishing that because of special conditions of the property, there is no reasonable use that can be made of the property that would be permitted under the ordinance. If there is any reasonable use, including the existing use, that is permitted under the ordinance, this alternative is not available. So I guess I think that there is a hardship here that comes from a workforce situation and does not come from the property. And if you have thoughts about that, I'd be happy to hear what you have to say, because
Yeah, I think this is the hardest one, and I got to it a little bit earlier, and so I think it comes down to, it comes down to whether you think, it's reasonable under the language of the ordinance to consider the 3 campuses as a site. And not to say that that meets the definition, but that meets the intent of the ordinance. Is to treat it as a single site given the close location, adjoining in one instance, and given the common, administration in between the 3 of them. So I think that's the hardest one. I'm able to get there. I think.
Let me ask you this: if you were sitting here being asked to create the whole of Riverwoods as a single site, given its locational and physical characteristics, would you have a problem with that?
Well, that's why you need a variance. Yeah,
I think that to consider it as a single site is a stretch because of its physical characteristics. That's about the property.
Right. So I don't. I think you've given the. I mean, and here's where we need to be careful, because we've been discussing both of these together, and I think that's appropriate. I think we do need to, certainly when we vote, and we should break out the 2 requests. And so, to me, the Boulder's request is far easier. I mean, those are adjoining. They could be merged. They've obviously chosen not to do that, and I guess they have that as a possible path forward. But in that case, you've got again, 2 adjoining parcels. In the grand scheme, you've got, 3 nearby parcels with common ownership, common administration. You've got residents that do go. I know they treat them as separate campuses, but I'm convinced by the testimony on both sides that there's certainly a difference of view, but there is an interplay between all 3 campuses.
Oh, sure.
And so, so to me, I think given the proximity and given the intent, and I do think this is the hard one, I am convinced that the intent of the ordinance is, again, to provide care, in close proximity and not have people stranded or people being shipped off-site. I do think it's harder for the woods, but it is in my mind, in the grand scheme of things, it's a very short jump between the 2 in terms of transportation, both for patients and residents. But I agree, that's the hardest one. That's my rationale.
Okay. Yeah, it is harder because for the woods.
Yeah.
I mean, makes sense to me to have a memory care facility that would be centralized for all 3 campuses as an added thing, but it's, not already part of the requirements of the ordinance. But anyway, I do have trouble with the hardship piece of it.
Okay.
So, do we want to discuss further?
I'm happy to. I don't know that there's a need. I think we've discussed it to my satisfaction, at least. Esther, I don't want to. We've been talking across you.
I'm fine. I'm just. No, I have.
She said good input, but I don't want to talk. I don't want to.
I have an easier time with the hardship looking at the ridge and the boulders because they are next to each other. It is contained. There's a wetland between them, but they're in close proximity. It's that woods across the street, down the hill. That's harder. I'm just thinking.
I don't know. I've been through, Alzheimer's and nursing home and assisted living in very close proximity to my life for quite a while now in the last few years. And to me, it's a big hardship to leave a building when you're at that stage of life.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Well, it involves a lot. It involves transfer and weather and, it's just not... It's not easy. It's a big difference to leave a building and go to a separate building. And
I don't...
That's just my strong feeling about why this was created the way it was created, was so that people wouldn't have to do that. And crossing the road is a bigger problem, but leaving the building is a big problem too.
Yeah, but I don't think that, as I read this, leaving the building is not a factor. It says on-site nursing home facilities.
You're right. It does. Although I do think that we were provided with something from the planning board approval last meeting that mentioned within the building, but that was language in the planning.
That was in the planning,
right?
And would be part of the amendment.
Of the amendment?
Of any amendment to the planning board.
I see.
If they went forward.
I see. Okay.
I don't disagree. And I can't speak to this personally, so I don't know. And but I don't read this definition as requiring.
You're right. It says on site, so that's a fair distinction. So, shall I make a motion?
Yeah, and again, I would, this is difficult, so I would ask that if you would make a motion on the case 2215, which is for the woods.
Okay. I move that we deny the application for variance from Article 2, Section 22, Section 2.2.26, definition of elderly congregate care for 7 Riverwoods Drive, ZBA case 2215. Based on not meeting criterias 3 and 5. Of the variance criteria.
And I know we discussed it. Can you, well, let me just, you've made your motion. Any second?
I'll second.
Okay. I would like to have a little bit of discussion just because I know we did discuss 3 and 5, but if you could just
elaborate.
Talk about why, why.
I think it's a difficult equation for us to weigh the benefit to the applicant and whether it's is not outweighed by harm to other individuals, including especially the residents, existing residents. I think that there's definitely plenty of evidence on both sides that it would be a benefit to the applicant, and to some members of the community feel it's a benefit to them, but plenty of other members of the community feel it would be harm to them, and I don't feel we have enough evidence to decide which outweighs the other.
Esther, any discussion?
On 3, no.
Okay. And I'd ask the same for 5 for those criteria.
I don't think that there are special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area that create a hardship. I believe there is a hardship related to the labor force and the management of the facility due to, business and marketing labor considerations, but it's not a property hardship. And that's why I don't think that it meets that criteria.
Because like we said, they're currently doing it, so it can...
Well, and it was created for this model, and I understand that things change, but I think that the zoning ordinance isn't the way to go about addressing change in this instance.
Okay, so we have a motion. After the discussion, we have a motion and a second. This will be a motion to deny the variance for 7 Riverwoods Drive for case 2215. All in favor, and favor would be to deny.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay. A motion for, or further, any further discussion on case 2216 or a motion?
Don't look at me.
No. Okay. Well, I'm going to stick with my point on this. So I guess I'll make a motion to deny the application of Riverwoods Article 2, Section 2.2.26 to permit skilled nursing care off-site on related campus for the property located at 5 Timber Lane, ZBA case 22-16, for the same reasons, that it doesn't meet, that the benefit to the applicant wouldn't be outweighed by harm to other individuals, and that the property does not meet the hardship criteria.
Okay. Any second?
It's hard. I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion. And again, we've discussed this, but to the extent it's for the same reason, I do think we have to provide the applicant with reasoning for the denial and why we don't think it meets the criteria, or they haven't met their burden.
I'm sorry, are you asking to go through it again?
No, I'm asking for discussion. On the last one, we had discussion. If it's for the same reason as
It is
for
the same reason.
including for the hardship,
Yes.
for special conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
For me, it's the same reason.
Okay.
They have a hard time with this one,
Okay.
because they are together.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, we have a motion and a second.
So are you saying you don't agree with, you do think it meets criteria 5, or?
It's not as clear cut to me as it is with Riverwoods for this one, just because the proximity is so different.
Okay.
And they, like I said, they can make it one parcel if they chose, and it wouldn't be a question, so that makes it
Yeah.
not as clear cut as with Riverwoods being across the way. It's like, yeah, that's, I'm not sure you could say anything to push me either way.
Okay.
So I guess I'm asking if you're agreeing with criteria 3, but not with criteria 5. I think we need to kind of be clear.
My brain's trying to work it out.
Okay. I'm not trying to push you, but just,
Yeah, this one, criteria 3, I don't see that being the issue. This one, it's more a 5 in the fact that I'm not sure it's a condition of the property itself, because they are doing it now, but 3, the impact I feel on the general public would be less, saying that they're 2 different campuses, but they are the same road system. It's an extra 100 feet to get to the boulders from the ridge, so I guess 3 is what's bothering me.
okay.
And it's bothering you because
I'm looking at the justice between the impact on Riverwoods, the organization, and the general public. I feel the impact is less. I think there's a bigger push that would benefit Riverwoods.
Got it.
More than it would impact the individuals versus across the street. It would impact those individuals much more, I feel, than those in the boulders.
So in this case, you would agree that criteria 5 is not met, but?
Yeah, 3,
Okay. Okay.
And Esther, can you just?
Move to amend, is that what I'm doing? Or am I explaining something more? I'm still a rookie, 3 years in.
No, I think it'd be helpful if you just explained your decision-making on 5, just so it's clear why the criteria isn't met or they haven't met their burden.
I guess considering 5 is, there's some condition of the property making it a hardship on them when, I'm not sure it's the property making it a hardship on them when they currently are doing it on those 2 parcels without issue. Well, a manpower issue, but physically there's no.
But not related to the property itself. Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, since we've made, the motion included the criteria, I do think if you want to amend, it makes sense.
Okay, I'll do my best.
To amend the motion?
To amend, the motion included the reasoning, your motion said the deny based on 3 and 5, correct?
Okay, so the motion is to deny. I don't think we all have to agree on.
Okay, as long as the motion.
She has one that she can't get clear, it only takes one criteria.
I agree.
So I think that's what I want to be clear for the record, but I don't know if we need to amend the motion, do we?
I don't think so. I thought you had included it in the motion, but if you didn't, okay, we have a motion.
All right, so
and a second.
Okay. You seconded it?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I think the record is clear for the reasons, so.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay. So the variances have been denied. You have 30 days, I'm sorry, you have 30 days to request rehearing. And thank you.
Thank you.
We do have more on the agenda tonight, but I'm gonna.
It's gonna take a minute to get.
Yeah, I was gonna say, given that we're gonna take a while to get out of the room, I would ask that we'll just take a short recess, and then we'll come back in about 5 minutes. Bob, I know. Bob and Martha are back with us and will be voting on the next applications. First order of business before we get to the applicants before us is to the 107 Panema Road LLC application has asked to continue for another month. Doug, what's the date of the next, do you know the date of the next CBA?
I don't, I'm
I can
sorry.
figure it out.
I got it here.
I'm sorry.
Give me a sec.
I assumed you just know these things. You just rattle them off.
All these years.
You don't know me very well, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, look.
It's
what I
on the
have right here.
21st, February 21st.
Thank you.
So I just quickly, I'm going to make a motion to continue
March
case 22-17 to
March
the
21st?
Is it February?
February 21st.
February. Oh, I'm sorry.
To the February 21st meeting.
I don't think you want to use the word continued, though. We haven't even opened it.
Postpone or?
Postpone, well,
I don't know.
That could be, what would the word be?
I think it's still a continue, I mean, it's on, it's an application.
Yeah, we know
haven't
what
opened it,
we
but-
mean.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
I should say, I know what you mean.
Okay, we have continued. So, thank you. This is the application of Riverbend Trust. If you would just introduce yourselves.
Yes, may it please the board, I'm here with my husband, Peter Mahar, I'm Carrie Marshall, and we purchased 2 Riverbend Circle earlier this year.
I'm going to ask you to, sorry, to pause. Are you having trouble hearing, Martha?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that better?
The mic actually doesn't, the mic is more
Just
for the
records.
cameras.
No,
So-
it comes out over here.
Oh.
It comes out over here.
Okay, great.
I'll be louder, though.
Well, then if you could both be louder and
Okay.
speak into the mic, that'd be great.
Perfect. I don't think I need to go into the background of a special exception. I think the board is obviously very learned. I can cut right to the chase. We have an application that's pending, and I have included way too many maps because I couldn't figure out which ones exactly that you wanted, so I provided every map that I could provide that would potentially impact the potential property. We purchased 2 Riverbend, which is an existing 2-family home. It has 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. It was initially constructed around 1985 and was preliminarily constructed as a 2-family home. If you look at the picture of the property, which is maybe 4 in from the back, you'll see that there's a salt box structure. That's the main house. There's a breezeway that connects the garage with the main house, and the smaller unit is located to the rear of the garage, so it's not evident from anybody that looks at the outside of the property. Even if you went to the side or the back, it's not clear that it's a 2-family property, and nothing would change with respect to that. We're not anticipating that we would increase the amount of living space or do anything at all to change the exterior of the property. And if you look at the tax card, the occupancy is listed as 2-family, and when you look at the second page of the tax card, it has a description, SFR, single-family residence / in-law. I looked in the zoning ordinance, and I did not see any definition of an in-law within the town of Exeter. The very last map we have, I have shaded in the parcel so that you can see that this is essentially the first property as you go down Riverbend Circle on the right-hand side. And we're proposing that the home be converted into 2 condominiums, no change in the configuration of the property, no change in the use of the property, and no change otherwise with respect to the property. This is undoubtedly a special exception as set forth in Article 4.2, Schedule 1. The premises is located in the R2 single-family zone. There are nearby condominiums. The Court Street condominium, I think, is one of the newer ones that was constructed with 3 condominiums. That's located probably about a quarter of a mile, maybe half a mile away. There's also condominiums at the old nursing home complex that's located on Court Street. There's a number of condominiums. Pursuant to the criteria 4B, the use is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be protected. The minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet. This lot is 29,990 square feet. Most, but not all of the property is fenced on the front and the rear. Each unit has separate laundry facilities. Each unit has their own kitchen, living room, 2 bathrooms in the bigger area, 1 bathroom in the smaller. Each has separate living quarters. The smaller unit behind the garage is approximately 864 square feet. The larger is approximately 2,400 square feet. The garage is 528 square feet, and the common breezeway is approximately 150 square feet. The lot well exceeds the minimum square footage required, as do each of the units. There's adequate landscaping. If you drove by it, you'll see that the front yard is a bit of a wreck right now. That's something that we're going to rectify in the spring. Just when we thought that we had done everything that this property could possibly need, we discovered that the septic line going out to the street was clogged with trees. So that's been dug up, and it was dug up, frankly, with the assistance of your building inspector, who let us go beyond the deadline so that they could have running sewage, appropriately running sewage. And as soon as the weather turns, we're going to fix that and recover the yard. There's also some fencing that we had to take up in order to get the backhoe in. And we've done, I think, just about everything. We've done new sills, we've done roofs, we've done skylights, we've done the siding. We got as much done as we could before the weather turned, and we've got the garage is filled with other siding materials, and that's on the docket to get done just as soon as it's appropriate. We want the place to look as good as possible and be in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. We maintain that having separate condominiums will actually improve the integrity of the neighborhood. There'll be separate ownership insight from both of the units, and we're expecting that it would assist the neighbors. There would be a lot of pride of ownership with the respective units. People would care for the property. It's plenty big. It's easily separate. There's already separate utilities in the property.
Where would the ingress and egress be for each unit?
Right now, they both have back doors, separate back doors, and they're through the breezeway. There's a common door, and then to the left, you'd go to the smaller unit. To the right, you'd go to the bigger unit.
So they basically be separate. All of the building would be individual units, except the breezeway would be common.
That's correct.
And in terms of the garage?
The garage would likely be split down the middle. Okay. The furnace for the smaller unit is on the right-hand portion of the garage. There's also a pull-down so that there's storage above the garage, and that would, I think, fairly go with the smaller unit. The larger unit has a pull-down so that the whole attic can be used for storage. So you wouldn't need the storage with a bigger unit.
Okay.
And the bigger unit has a full foundation, which has had a recent sump pump, and the garage is on a slab. Yeah, sure. Beyond the garage is on a slab.
So just if you can meet, Doug, if they were to do this condominium, they'd lay out a condominium site plan with limited common area and all that stuff. And would that be?
That's all on them. Once this is granted.
So you're just going to say that each unit has to have 2 spaces and whatever, and we're good with it. Okay.
And there's plenty of parking. Right now, there's two spots in the garage. There's 2 spots outside of the garage, and you could put cars also along the side.
Okay.
What would the parking requirement be by bedroom?
It's not, it would actually be 1 for the 1 bedroom and 2, so it would be a total of 3.
Okay.
Easily, absolutely no question. There's 4, and there's probably.
It's currently considered an accessory dwelling unit.
That's correct.
Is it legally an accessory? Oh, sorry.
Their questions. It is currently considered an accessory dwelling unit. It meets the criteria today, but it did not meet the criteria when it was built because it is in excess of 720 square feet. Do you happen to know if it was approved as an accessory dwelling unit by the Zoning Board of Adjustment at a previous meeting?
I don't know. I've looked at the tax cards, I've looked at the building inspector's file on it, and I know that when the initial permits, I think Mr. Bernier built the property, when the initial permits were taken, it was built with this configuration, with this square footage, and as a separate unit.
Because at the time it was built, and up until about 2 years ago, there was a requirement that it be less than 700, maximum of 720 square feet in order to be a legal accessory dwelling unit. To your point about pride of ownership, as an accessory dwelling unit at present, it does require one of the two units to be owner occupied, so there is pride of ownership existing. With the condo unit, neither is required to be owner occupied. Both could be leased, both could be made available for Airbnbs or something like that, short-term leases. Not Airbnbs, not Airbnbs, but short-term.
And it would depend on how...
I don't understand why going to a condo you think would increase. If you could help me figure that out, why you think that would be better for the neighborhood.
Well, that would depend also in part on how the condominium documents are written. It would be much more difficult for somebody to get financing on a conventional Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan if more than 50% of the units are rented. So we could write into the condo documents, and I think I would be smart to, that they can't be rented.
Neither.
Right.
Are you planning on occupying one of them yourself?
In fairness, no.
Okay. So this is an investment?
Yes.
Okay.
You say this was initially constructed as a two-family home? The initial construction back in 1985?
It was. Ian Taylor and his wife Barbara Taylor bought the property. At the time they were living in Arizona. They bought the property, and kind of as an aside, it's sort of a weird design. Mr. Taylor designed it so that there would be no direct sunlight coming in because he was used to Arizona and he was from Scotland. And her father was at Leahy Clinic. He died and her mother was left alone. So when they built the property, they built it with an accessory dwelling unit for her.
Well, and Doug, if this is a question for you, if it was under single ownership with an in-law, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily need to be permitted if it was all
That's correct.
Same family, and that may have been the case.
Correct. We don't recognize in-law units.
So we have no record of it becoming an accessory dwelling unit legally?
I believe it.
Okay.
Sounds like it probably didn't.
Although for more than 20 years, cars have been registered there and residents have been able to vote. So it has not been something they've had to, or tried to slide under the radar.
No. Well, and the question is whether it meets the conversion criteria.
It meets the conversion criteria. I'm just trying to get at what it was.
Yes, and that's why we're here, because it does meet the conversion criteria, all of it. If not, there would have been a variance thrown in there for something else, but under the conversion, it also allows it to be the rentals or condos. If it is going to be rentals, then it has to be owner occupied. So
one of them, but
if they're condos, they don't. We went through this with Seacoast Family Promise when they bought their place down there, so.
The initial permit granted back in 1985, was it for a two-family home?
No.
Pardon?
No.
No, so this sentence is wrong. It was initially constructed as a two-family house.
Well, I think the mistake is, the understanding is that Carrie had explained that it was for an in-law. It wasn't a two-family, but it evolved into something, and
but it's recorded on the tax card as being a two-family, so at some point the deed must have been changed.
And the kitchens were constructed at the initial time. They're custom cabinets in both of the kitchens. They were both done the same time. It was clearly two separate units right from the start.
tax assessing and code
Back in
enforcement don't
1985?
Talk to each other?
talk to one another.
In 1985?
I believe that's when it was built.
It was.
John Bernier built them, and it was probably, they did the,
That's what it says on the tax card.
yeah, I mean, there's no evidence of anything other than that, so we have to base it on what the tax card said.
But importantly, you're not making, you're not making any changes to the existing and what you believe to be the original structure.
No, that's right.
The exterior.
Yes.
Footprint's not changing.
The interior is not changing either.
Well,
It says year built on the card, 1985. Living area, 3,030 square feet.
and on the same card, it says number of kitchens, 1. And then down at the bottom, something about extra features, and then it says code kitchen. I don't understand. If it's 2 families, they've got to have 2 kitchens.
And it has occupancy too.
I think what happened back in 1985, in my opinion, is irrelevant. That's why we're here, just trying to clean this whole thing up now.
But if you look at, on that same card where it has extra features, it has a kitchen.
So 1,000 and only $2,900 more with an extra kitchen?
I'll tell you, it's way over assessed.
Well,
at least when I bought it.
Again, that's not zoning criteria.
No, it's not.
And Martha, what I found on a number of occasions is the tax assessor doesn't always, they get to see what they can see. Sometimes they get in, sometimes they don't. And they don't care about zoning either. It's not their purview. Well, I don't, enforcement.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's often, they often don't, are inconsistent with code.
And that's why we're here now, because there was no clarity on it. If it was built and as a 2-family and it back in 1985, then that would have been a different story.
Because we did have zoning then.
It is what it is.
And it is, and they meet all I know that size, open space, all of that is all met.
Yes, absolutely.
So you referenced several, question for the applicant, please. You referenced several other uses on Court Street, which are condominium or multifamily. Are you aware of anyone else on Riverbend Circle, or would this be the first?
I believe it would be the first.
When the immediate butters were notified, they're not here.
And I don't think the ownership is, ownership is outside of our purview. In terms
On a 2-family, if an accessory dwelling unit, it's not. On a 2-family conversion, it is. It can be, if it's rental, one has to be owner occupied.
I agree, but I don't believe we can tell the applicant whether they can have it as condominium ownership or not.
Nope. We can't.
It's up to the applicant.
It's up to the applicant.
And if you don't end up declaring it to condominium, then one side has to be owner occupied.
Correct.
That's for the owner.
But this was built without any...
Right, so it doesn't go forward, so it can't be grandfathered.
Right.
Because there's no proof that it was built. If there was proof that it was built and was legal at the time, they could just continue it. But because there is none, they have to come to us. But we can't deny them because because it was illegal.
Because it was oversized at the time.
Criteria now. Yeah.
It does meet the criteria now.
And my guess is they probably, I don't even know that they looked that closely at the time. It was probably an actual, relative living there. I'm guessing they probably didn't apply it, but who knows? I don't know. But it doesn't.
But it is over.
And but all that really matters is what's, is whether or not it meets the special exception criteria now.
But it's not legal.
Well, it will be if we approve it tonight.
That's the idea, that we need to...
So we can't deny it because it was formerly illegal. We can give it extra scrutiny if that's justified, but I don't know that it is. It isn't legal. They're asking us to make it legal tonight.
And the ZBA is empowered to make a special exception. And the definition for a special exception is that it must be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. A special exception is a use of land that is permitted subject to specific conditions that are set forth in the ordinance. So we know in an R2, condos are a special exception that's allowed. And a special exception provides for uses that are necessary and desirable, but potentially incompatible with uses normally allowed. So it's not permissible as a matter of right, but provided we can satisfy the criteria within a special exception, then I would contend that it would be appropriate for you folks to grant it. So a special exception allows us, because a special exception for this use is allowed in the R2 zone, we're permitted to come before you and make this request, provided we can meet the criteria.
So, are there any more? Oh, what am I doing? You're the chair. Jesus.
Thank you, Bob. Are there any more questions for the applicant?
Yes, I drove by and I saw a chimney. I think it was a steel, I did, coming out of the, as you face the garage.
Yes.
The left-hand side. What's that?
That's the, isn't that the vent? That's the vent for the furnace.
It's a chimney for the furnace that heats the...
The furnace for the back unit is in the garage, and there's a vent that, it's a forced hot air, oil-fired furnace, and that's the vent for it.
I mean, this looked like as though it were a fireplace or some kind of a stove.
No, that's in the garage. There is a fireplace in the main house, but there is no fireplace in the smaller unit. And that vent is actually coming from the garage. The furnace for the smaller unit is in the garage.
So the garage, you didn't provide a layout of the second apartment, I mean second building, second family unit. Is it?
Actually, there's one on, if you look at the card that has the photo.
Yes.
And then the front left-hand square that is 22 by 16, that's the garage. You have that breezeway in between the two. It's not entirely accurate because the breezeway connects directly to the garage unit. But that unit that is 24 by 36, that's the garage, behind the garage, and that's the unit.
Right.
But the furnace is in the front part?
It is. The furnace is in the garage part.
In the front?
That front square. It's in the back corner.
Back corner of the front square?
It is, yep. The back left-hand corner. And that vent that you can see from the outside is coming out. If you see where that front square is, it's coming probably 2 or 3 feet in from that. The vent is actually in the garage.
The furnace is in the garage?
It is.
So how are you going to...
But it's just the furnace for that one apartment. There's a furnace for the house in the house.
The main house is a basement furnace, a separate furnace, separate heating system.
So the separate...
Separate heating system, separate oil barrels.
Separate electric.
Okay, so how is the garage going to be separated? And you said there's going to be a garage? If you've got the furnace in the garage, do you have...
Down the middle, so that the left-hand side of the garage will go with the smaller unit, the right-hand side will go with the bigger unit.
So in your dimensions that you gave, did you give the additional dimensions of the...
I did not, no.
Okay.
Because it's not living space.
A furnace?
It doesn't matter. That would only matter. It will matter if it becomes a condominium, but that's on the applicant as when they divvy it up in condominium. So that most likely that will become a limited common area associated with one of the units, the furnace and the right side of the
breezeway certainly
up
would
in any way. It's actually easier in this case because everything, it sounds like it's actually on the correct side of the garage.
So where is the front door of the smaller unit?
It's through the breezeway.
Through the breezeway.
What's not quite, if you look at the picture, when you look at the picture, you see the garage there. And the garage actually extends a little bit over into the breezeway so that you go directly from the breezeway into the smaller unit.
Into stairs for the smaller unit. Because it's upstairs, right?
No, it's downstairs.
No, it's behind the garage.
Oh, it's behind the garage. Oh, I thought it was upstairs.
No, it's behind the garage.
I see.
You mean that white is not a window? I mean, a door, the white is not a door?
Yes, the white is a door. That's the middle door. That door is in the middle of the breezeway.
Okay.
And then when you go in the breezeway, there's double doors that go into the house.
To the right?
Yes, and then on the back left corner of the breezeway, you take 2 steps down and go into the smaller unit.
Not into the garage, but into the...
Right, you can go from the garage into the breezeway.
Well...
Or...
That's right.
Okay.
Or you can go from the breezeway into the unit.
But this doesn't really impact what we're voting on.
And there's also a back door to the breezeway and a back door to the smaller unit.
This affects their marketability.
It does. I mean,
that's their business.
Yeah, there are specific criteria that they have to meet just for a conversion that are it's in note 1 of whatever the table
Page
of uses.
4-7.
Yeah. And Doug has confirmed that they meet all of those, and those relate primarily to square footage, open space, those types of things.
Do we want to go through the special exception criteria, Mr. Chair, or do you want to?
Well, why don't we go through it quickly?
A, that the use is a permitted special exception is set forth in Article 4.2, which it is. That the use is designated, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience will be protected. There's really no major difference between the existing usage of this as an accessory dwelling unit, legal or otherwise, and the proposal that it be a condominium or a residential two-family conversion. So I believe it meets criteria B. Y'all feel free to interrupt me.
Yeah, I agree. It's behind, so it's screened from the neighborhood anyway, and there's both off-street, there's plenty of off-street and garage parking.
That the proposed use will be compatible with the zoning district and adjoining post-1972 development. I mean, there are many accessory dwelling units in the R2 zone. There probably aren't that many condominiums, but there are some on Court Street. So I'm a little shaky on this one, but I think it's probably okay.
Well, there's no physical change. It's an ownership difference, and I mean, it's never been a legal two-family, but
it has been operated as a two-family.
But there's no physical change.
And it won't impact the neighborhood. And it's the lot's large enough to support it.
As a condominium, would individual owners be entitled to make changes to the exterior of their property without coming before this board?
Yes. They would. It would depend what the condominium documents say, but we wouldn't have any say.
Only if it touched a setback or something like that.
Correct.
Just like any house.
Just like any house, okay? D, that adequate landscaping and screening are provided as required herein. I feel this is not appropriate here because there's no exterior change being proposed.
And the unit's screened by the garage anyway, so although it sounds like...
behind, there is a house behind it, not on whatever that is, whatever that's just, I don't know.
You can't see the house behind it.
I can't even remember what this is. Patricia Rao. Thank you, Patricia.
And you can't see it from behind it. It kind of slopes up.
Right. And there's also a house on Court Street that sort of backs up there again. E, that adequate off-street parking and loading is provided. Again, there's no ingress and egress is immaterial, and apparently we've heard testimony that off-street parking is sufficient given the number of bedrooms, which is the criteria. I'll keep going then, that the use conforms with applicable regulations governing the district where located. Certainly seems to. It's not a large-scale development. I do not believe that town planner review would be required or planning board approval because there is no site plan, there's no external change being made to the property. And H, we certainly have heard no testimony that there should not adversely affect abutting or nearby property values. I just realized I'm charging right into this and we haven't even closed public session yet.
You're correct. See, you should have taken over. You started to take over. You should have continued. I know.
But I'd have blown it too. I'd have just gone right into this.
There is no public.
I guess my point is, you don't need to stand up. You can sit.
Yeah, you can sit down. We are closing. We have closed public session.
When I started marching through the criteria, that meant
Luckily, Peter's not going to be a problem.
we were done asking you questions. And I and J do not apply. And then for conversions, we have an additional 8 criteria that have to be met. The number of spaces for off-street parking comply with Article 5.6 off-street parking, it does. Minimum lot size, it meets that, which is 30% per unit. The structure shall have been a residence for a minimum of 10 years, it has. The lot must meet a minimum of 20% open space, which it obviously does. Conversions intended to become rent, and I'm saying this for the benefit of the applicant, not for the members of the board, intended to be rental units, one of the dwelling units shall remain owner occupied. But that's apparently not an issue here. We may, again, require planning board review, but I do not believe that's appropriate because there is no site plan that impacts the outside of the property. Conversions of 3 or more units must be reviewed by the planning board. This is for 2. We may allow expansion to an existing structure for the purpose of providing additional area for the units, providing all other criteria are met. That we have not been requested, have not been asked for that, that's not part of the proposal. And prior to any renovations, the owner shall provide evidence to the town building inspector, otherwise known as the code enforcement officer, that septic facilities are adequate for both units. And that's up to
public sewer, I believe.
Yep, and they fixed the pipe.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, upon my examination and discussion of the special exception criteria, I believe it does meet all of the criteria and would make a motion to approve the application of Riverbend Trust for a special exception to permit the existing single-family home at 2 Riverbend Circle to be converted to a 2-family residential structure.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Martha, that was aye. Sorry,
It was.
I jumped ahead and interrupted you. Thank you. Okay. Congratulations.
You don't have to give me a deadline to get the condo docs.
It's up to you.
I'll do it.
You don't have to do that's not our approval. Yes.
I'll do them right away.
But if you don't do them and record them, then you better have an owner occupied rental.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm moving up.
Thank you.
Careful out there.
Okay. So all that's left are the minutes from December 20th.
Nothing I said was wrong. What? Nothing I said was wrong.
Yeah, you did.
I checked my stuff. My stuff's good.
I actually didn't have any, I didn't see anything.
The only thing I saw was one of the property owners, or the residents that testified, I think his name was spelled wrong. It was Mr. Cully, I believe.
Colley, C-O-L-L-E-Y.
Well, his letters are C-U-L-E. Or L-L-Y, I think.
This
He
is
wrote us several.
line 184.
Right. He sent us several letters, and I believe his name is spelled differently, so I just saw, that's the only thing I noticed.
Noted.
I will find his name in these letters, and he spoke again tonight. C-U-L-L-Y.
Okay. Anything else?
think she does a great job.
She does.
Yeah. She really does.
We're spoiled.
Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended to correct Mr. Cully's name?
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, please.
Aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.